And so we're going to do chapter 7, a little bit different to most of the chapters of Tehillim that we've done. It's based mostly on David and Shaul's relationship, and it's more historical in nature than some of the others that we've done. So just to give some perspective to understand the history of what's going on, David HaMelech has a lot of enemies. Sorry, he has lots of enemies, but his most difficult enemy is Shaul. And I think we have such a negative picture in our heads of Shaul, but if you study about Shaul, Shaul was actually a great tzaddik. He was chosen by Hashem to be the first king of the Jewish people. So Shaul is a great tzaddik, but he's not a great leader, as we'll discuss afterwards. And for some reason, which mostly remains a mystery, there are certain opinions of why it was like that. But he hated David, and he tried to kill him numerous times. Mostly his hatred of David seems to be some level of jealousy, and so he spent a lot of his time chasing David and trying to kill him. On 2 occasions, David HaMelech had opportunity to kill Shaul, but he swore that he would never do such a thing. He would never ever do that. So the 2 most, which are the famous times that David could have killed Shaul. One time, Shaul was actually chasing David. He came into a cave where David was hiding in the back. He didn't realize that David was there in the cave, and he went to sleep. And Shaul could have so easily killed him at that time. He was completely vulnerable, and also all David did was he went over to Shaul and he cut off a corner of his robe, just like "I was here" message. And then another time, he also came across Shaul HaMelech sleeping, and he again could so easily have killed him. And all he did was take away his sword and take it home with him. Again, an "I was here" message. And David promised that he would never kill Shaul. Shaul, after each of these incidents, promised that he wouldn't chase David again, but soon enough he was chasing David. And so it wasn't an easy, the whole thing wasn't easy for David. Remembering also that Shaul was not just the king of Israel, but he was David's father-in-law, and he was also David's best friend's father, son. So it was like really, really difficult for David. When Shaul died eventually, so the commentaries say, well, first of all, we see in Tanakh that David eulogizes him unbelievably. David was actually heartbroken that Shaul died, even though he had been his enemy and his chaser for all this time. But the commentaries tell us that there was some little bit of gladness or joy that his enemy, like he's been relieved of his enemy, and he feels very bad about it. He knew that this was something that he should not have done. In fact, Hashem said to him, like, when you speak about your enemies and you speak about the happiness of the downfall of your enemies, don't include Shaul. And Hashem told David, he said, Shaul is actually a greater tzaddik than you are. So David felt very bad about this, and he wrote this kapitel of Tehillim as a tshuva, as a, I'm sorry, okay, that is not how David HaMelech should really have behaved. So that's a little bit of just a brief outline of what this kapitel of Tehillim is. And it begins, if you are following inside, it's Zayin Pasuk Aleph. It says, Shigayon LeDavid, Shigayon by David, we'll explain that, Asher Shar LaHashem, which he sang to Hashem, Al Divrei Cush Ben Yamini, about Cush from the tribe of Binyamin. So our first thing we want to know is, what does it mean when it begins with this Shigayon LeDavid. It just as for your own information, this is the only kapitel of Tehillim that begins with the word Shigayon. And in fact, according to the commentaries, the word Shigayon is used only one other time in the whole of Tanakh, in Habakkuk. So what is Shigayon when it says Shigayon LeDavid? So simple understanding. I actually went to look in 4 or 5 different translations to see how the different people translate it. And very simply, Shigayon is a different word for song. So Shigayon LeDavid, a song by David. Other commentaries tell us that Shigayon was a specific musical instrument, that David, when he made this kapitel of Tehillim, he used that musical instrument. And a third simple opinion is that Shigayon is a particular tune, like a certain beat that's used. And Shigayon LeDavid, when he made this kapitel of Tehillim, he said that it should be said in this particular tune, in this I doubt it was a rap, but something to that effect. So that's all the simple understandings of the word Shigayon, Shigayon LeDavid. Slightly deeper than that, Shigayon, says the Rambam, is an intense devotion to Hashem. When a person serves Hashem, when any of us serve Hashem, we are supposed to serve Hashem. The ideal way of serving Hashem is that there's no benefit in it for us at all. That the reason we serve Hashem is our complete devotion to Hashem. We love Hashem and we want to do what Hashem wants, just for that reason. So not because we're looking for blessings in our lives, not because we're afraid of the opposite, not because we get pleasure out of it, but the real reason that we're supposed to serve Hashem is because we are just completely devoted to Hashem. Very few people ever reach that, reach that level. The story is told of the Alter Rebbe that he had reached that level, and then one day was learning a very difficult tractate of something that he was learning, and he sighed with pleasure when he understood it. And he had such a vision. He was told, like, at that moment, you took away your intense devotion, that up until now, everything you did was out of complete devotion to Hashem. I'm sure that he quickly got back to that, being that he was the Alter Rebbe. But when it begins over here, Shigayon LeDavid, according to that understanding of what is a Shigayon, David HaMelech was able to serve Hashem absolutely, completely, and totally for Hashem's sake, just out of devotion to Hashem. And says that the whole rest of this chapter of Tehillim, which is going to ask Hashem to help him to pursue his enemies, to judge him favorably, etc., all of that is coming from a place of Shigayon, from a place of absolute, intense devotion to Hashem and wanting the world to be what Hashem intends for the world to be. And then we're going to give the last explanation I'm going to share with you, which seems to be much simpler than that. Shigayon, from the word shogeg, or mistake, that David begins this kapitel of Tehillim by saying, Shigayon LeDavid. David made a mistake. David erred. He made a mistake. And what was his mistake? His mistake was being happy when Shaul HaMelech died. And that tiny little bit of happiness, and he feels bad about it. He says, Shigayon LeDavid, it was a mistake. And this, I think, describes why we think David HaMelech is so much greater than Shaul, or why David HaMelech was a great leader more than Shaul. So a great leader doesn't mean that the person is perfect. A great leader means that the person takes responsibility. And the big difference between Shaul and David is that Shaul blamed circumstance when things didn't go the way that they were supposed to. And David HaMelech took responsibility. He said, I made a mistake. We have a similar concept with Reuven and Yehuda. So you know that Reuven messed up and he couldn't be the leader. He lost the rights of the firstborn, and Yehuda got them, right? Yehuda, from Yehuda comes kings. And if we go and we have a look at it, Reuven seems to be much greater than Yehuda. Reuven did teshuvah his whole life, and he learned and he studied and he felt bad about, like what had happened. And he couldn't be the leader. Yehuda had to be the leader because Yehuda had leadership qualities. And even though Yehuda did things that were really not okay, he had the whole story with his wife and his 3 sons and Tamar, the whole story with Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda took responsibility for what he did wrong, and that's a leader. And this 2 words of the beginning of this kapitel tell us David's greatness. Shigayon le David. David made a mistake, and it's okay to make mistakes sometimes, as long as you take responsibility for your mistakes and you do your best to fix them up. So David made this mistake, and now he says, Asher Sar la Hashem. Now he's singing the song to Hashem. Al Divrei Hush ben Yemini, about Hush, the son of the Yemini. And most of the commentaries agree that this is talking about Shaul HaMelech. He doesn't mention his name because he's going to say some few negative things about him, but Cush represents someone who is very handsome, very beautiful, and Benyamini, the son of or comes from the tribe of Binyamin. And so this is like alluding to Shaul HaMelech, the king who was most handsome, and he came from the tribe of Binyamin. He was a descendant of Rachel. And why this particular way of alluding to Shaul HaMelech over here is because it explains to us a little bit, and to David mostly, why Shaul was always trying to kill David. Why didn't Shaul think that David was fit to be the next king of Israel? And this was because he was a Benyamini. He was from the tribe of Binyamin. He was a son of, he was a descendant of Rachel. And as far as Shaul understood, that in order to be king of Israel, you had to be a descendant of Rachel, which was incorrect, but that was that's how he felt. And so this is why he pursued David and tried to kill him. And when David finally understood that, when he said Benyamini, it's because he believes that that in order to be king, you have to be from the tribe of Binyamin. He was pacified about Shaul chasing him and trying to kill him. And what does David say to Hashem? He speaks about his various enemies, not only about Shaul. And he says, Pasuk Beis, Hashem Elokai b'cha chasisi. Hashem, I trust in you. I take refuge in you. Hashi'eni mikol rodfai. Save me from all my pursuers, v'hatzileni, and rescue me. And what is he saying? He's saying, Hashem, I know that I can't do this on my own. If I'm supposed to be killed, I'm going to be killed. But what do I know, and why am I not going to kill Shaul HaMelech when I have opportunity? Because b'cha chasisi, because I trust in you, Hashem. I trust in you absolutely and completely. The commentaries tell us that this line, Hashem Elokai b'cha chasisi, is one that we should be repeating all the time. Whenever we're afraid, we need to say, Hashem Elokai, Hashem my God, b'cha chasisi, in you I trust, in you I take refuge. And what does it mean to take refuge in Hashem? So a cute explanation that I saw on this, it says, b'cha has the numerical value of 22, right? A bet is 2, and the chaf is 20. And so it says if we need to take refuge, if we need to find peace of mind and feel safe from our outside enemies, then we must delve into the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis. In other words, we must either say Tehillim or study Torah. B'cha, in those 22 letters, chasisi, we can take refuge, and then we know that Hashem will help us from all those who are chasing us, and He will rescue us. Pasuk Gimel, Pen yitraf ka'ari nafshi. Like lions, they can like lions tear apart my soul in matzil. There's no one to protect me. And so he uses the picture of a lion ripping apart its prey to give us an idea of how Shaul wanted to get rid of him. So just like the lion is the king of the jungle, and the lion gets its prey and rips it apart without any thought, like how does the prey feel, what's going on. So Shaul HaMelech, king of the people, if he got hold of David HaMelech, he would have ripped him apart without any rachmanas completely. And he says, Hashem, and he points out that in Matzil, there's no one to protect me, there's no one to save me. One of the most difficult things for David was that nobody spoke up. There were so many people around. The palace was full of people. Everybody knew that David was David, and nobody spoke up and said to Shaul HaMelech, like, let up, leave him alone, don't chase him, save him. So the only one who could save Hashem, Yohanan tried, but he was in a different. He was actually thrown out, and it wasn't there part of Shaul's team anymore. But David was very much on his own, and he understood that, and he says in this kapitel, it can only be Hashem who will help me. Hashem, Hashem, if I've really done something wrong, and I deserve this, if I did bad to my friends, and I was wicked to my enemies, I left them empty, then then let my enemies let my enemies chase me and catch me, and let them stamp to the ground my life, and bury my honor in the dust. So he's saying, Hashem, if I deserve it, if I did something wrong, then let them catch me, let them kill me, let them do whatever they must to me. He says, but Kuma Hashem ba'pecha, Hashem, get up in your anger. Hinase ba'avras terurai, raise yourself against my enemies, v'urai elai, and awaken for me mishpat tzivisa, judgment that you would command. And the Medrash tells us, it takes us back to the story of Moshe when he was protecting the Jews from destruction after the sin of the golden calf. And it says that 5 different angels of destruction, came out and wanted to destroy the Jews. There was Af, which is anger. There was Chema, which is wrath. There was Ketzef, which is displeasure. There was Hashmid, which is destruction. There was Hashachas, which is annihilation. And so these 5 angels came out and they wanted to destroy the Jews. And Moshe turned to Hashem and he said, Hashem, you get rid of one of those angels, I'll get rid of the other one. And Hashem said, what will happen to the other 3? How will you protect the Jews from the other 3? And Moshe Rabbeinu answered, he said, the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov will each get rid of one of those angels. And Hashem said, okay. And he allowed that to happen. And the Jews were saved from being killed or being wiped out, destroyed after the sin of the golden calf. And there, Moshe Rabbeinu used the words, he said, come Hashem, arise against your wrath, your anger. And that's like a hint for us, or it alludes to us that you're saying, Kuma Hashem, get up Hashem, ba'pecha, and you fight against the angel of Af. And so David HaMelech is echoing, he's learned from Moshe, and he's saying exactly the same thing. Kuma Hashem ba'pecha, Hashem, you get up and fight against Af, okay, fight against the angel Af to protect us, or to protect me in this case, from the angel of wrath. The Medrash also tells us that what David HaMelech is saying to Hashem over here is, Hashem, the people need to see you protecting me. And why do they need to see you protecting me? Because when people see that Hashem is looking after those who do what he wants, what Hashem wants, that's a Kiddush Hashem. And sometimes, says David HaMelech here, and we come across this idea in many places, Hashem, you're the one who has to make the Kiddush Hashem. Your actions, the things that you, Hashem, do, saving somebody who keeps Torah mitzvahs, being nice to someone who's good and a mensch, you, Hashem, are making Kiddush Hashem, because people look and they say, good people are taken care of. Hashem looks after his people. And so, Kuma Hashem, get up Hashem ba'pecha, and with your wrath, show the world that But this is how people have to behave. He continues and he says, when nations gather around you, then you go back up to the heavens and go up to. So he is alluding to two different things that are happening over here. The nations must come and they must see, they must understand that if they fight against David HaMelech, they're actually fighting against Hashem. And it's not, you can't divide between Hashem and the Jews. You can't say, oh, I believe in Hashem, but I don't, I'm not going to be kind to the Jews. It doesn't work like that. If you fight against the Jews, you're fighting against Hashem. And the nations have to know that. And that's what David is saying here. He says, when the nations surround you, you have to go up to heaven. And so I'm not interested in hearing this. If you fight David, you are fighting me. And one little level more than that, a little bit deeper, which applies more to us, it says that these nations actually refer to the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, the enemy that we all fight. Each of us fights against our own personal enemies. And what is so maddening about our Yetzer Hara things, that not that it makes us sin, that's our fault, right? The Yetzer Hara's job is to tempt us, and we get tempted, and we do whatever we do. That's we have to take responsibility for that. But what makes us really mad is that the Yetzer Hara comes and tempts us, and convinces us to do something we shouldn't, and then the Yetzer Hara goes to Hashem, surrounds Hashem, and says to Hashem, well, you want to hear what Rivki Chaikin did? I saw her doing it today. Okay. So David HaMelech says, when our enemies come and report on us, in other words, when the Yetzer Hara comes and rats on us to you, Aleh Lamaram Shiva. Go away, don't listen to them, tell them that you're not interested in hearing what they say. Hashem yadinamim shafteni Hashem katzit yuchsumi alai. Hashem sentence the nations, judge me according to my righteousness and my sincerity. So look at the difference of how he asks Hashem to judge us and to judge them. Firstly, he says Hashem yadinamim, Hashem judge them. Judge them harshly. See what they do right and see what they do wrong. But when it comes to me, shafteni, when you're judging me, ketzidki uchasumi, take into account my righteousness and my sincerity. Look and see how hard I tried, what I meant to do, what I was thinking, what I was planning. Take that into consideration. Yigmar nara reshaim, let the evil of the wicked people destroy them, uschein and tzaddik, and support the pious, uveichen libos uchlayos elikim tzaddik. And Hashem, you are the ones who can check out the hearts and the kidneys of good people. So take notice of all the things he asks Hashem. The first thing, he doesn't say kill the wicked, kill my enemies, but he says finish off the wickedness, the badness. And this is something we all have to remember. We're not asking Hashem to get rid of anyone. We're asking Hashem to get rid of bad, to get rid of negativity. And then the second thing that we're asking from Hashem is that you must check out our hearts, and our kidneys represents our thoughts actually over here, according to the Medrash. Only Hashem knows what's in our hearts and our thoughts. And when Hashem judges us, he must take into account what we were thinking, why we land, what was our real intentions, what did we really mean to be doing. And he continues and he says, I trust that Hashem will defend me because he recognizes those whose hearts are true. And only Hashem knows whose hearts are true. Hashem is a righteous judge, and he gets angered every single day. So at simple literal level of this pasuk, Hashem is a righteous judge, and every single day there are people who make him cross, right? He gets angry every single day. Slightly deeper level than that, we're told that Hashem gets angry every single day for a moment. One moment, and in fact in the Medrash it gives numbers like 1 millionth of a second or something to that effect, that every single day Hashem has a moment where he's angry, and we have no idea when that moment is. It says only Bilam Harasha, the wicked Bilam, knew when that moment was, and he was able to avoid ever getting himself into trouble in that moment of Hashem's anger. The rest of us always hope that we won't get in trouble in that moment. But even deeper than that, Reb Nachman of Breslov says, change the punctuation here a little bit, and it says, Elokim, Shefet Tzadik. A Shefet Tzadik, a tzaddik, a righteous person, judges God. What does that mean? A righteous person judges God. And Reb Nachman of Breslov explains, he says, good people, not talking just about tzaddikim in the pure sense of the word, but tzaddik, a good person. He says a good person, his job in this world is to look for good in other people, to judge people for the good, and to come back to Hashem and say, no, Hashem, this person deserves good, and this person deserves even more good. And that which you're annoyed about that person, Hashem, fix it, right? So our job in this world is to judge Hashem, so to speak, kiviyachol, that Hashem shouldn't be angry with the world and with the people, but that we should continuously point out and show Hashem the good in this world, so that he shouldn't be angry. And he carries on, he says, now, if a person doesn't repent, then Hashem will sharpen his sword and he will get his bow ready for shooting, because he has prepared deadly weapons, and he has sharpened his arrows to chase. The one who's wicked brings out evil and hatches mischief and invents lies. Bar kara v'yachparehu, he has dug a pit and he's made the pit even deeper. V'yipol b'shachat yifal, but he falls into the trap which he prepared. And this again is a lesson for us as David HaMelech. And when people do bad or plan bad against other people, they themselves get caught up by it. The Medrash says that this is talking specifically about Mordechai. In fact, the Medrash says that this whole kapitel of Tehillim, this whole chapter 7, is talking about Mordechai, and he goes all the way back to the beginning, and he says Cush ben Yamini is talking about Mordechai because Mordechai was from the tribe of Benjamin, and then he points out over here how that the enemies that David is referring to is Haman. And what did Haman do? He dug a pit, which he actually built a gallows. But Yipol the Shachal Yifal, and he fell into his own pit. He was hanged on his own gallows. So that's the Medrash opinion on this pasuk. A different opinion is that this is talking about the Egyptians, that the Egyptians decided they would get rid of the Jews by throwing the babies into the Nile River, and they were gotten rid of by drowning in the sea. But then simply the commentaries tell us that we all should know that when you plan bad on other people, then you will land up in trouble. Bad people do not succeed in the end. Possibly it looks to us like they are succeeding, but they don't succeed in the end. And he finishes off by saying, Yoshev Amala Baroshe for Al Kadkodei Chamasa Yered. That which he does bad will fall back on his own head, and his violence will come down on his own head. And then, as always, David HaMelech finishes off, I shouldn't say as always, but most times, David HaMelech finishes off by thanking Hashem. Thanking Hashem for looking after him. He says, Eide Hashem ketzidkei. I'll give thanks to Hashem when we see his righteousness, Va'azamra Shem Elyon, and I will sing the name of Hashem, who is the greatest and the highest of all. And that is this capital of Tehillim finished. So.